In the far-flung reaches of the galaxy, where the stars are as close as an afterthought and alien civilizations abound in their weirdness, there was one species that stood out. Humanity. Or as the galaxy's other species like to call them, the unpredictable anomaly. The Union of Galactic Species had long debated what made humanity such an outlier in the galactic community. Sure, they were clever. Sure, they were resilient. But what really set them apart from the other species wasn't something anyone had expected, their uncanny ability to think outside the box. And the galaxy was about to experience that in a way that would make history. Captain Jenna Sloan of the starship Peregrine leaned over the holotable, eyes squinting as she analyzed the readings from the nearby moon. It wasn't the first time she'd encountered this kind of anomaly, but it was certainly the most confusing. A planet-sized moon, about the size of Earth's Luna, had drifted too close to a massive gas giant. The moon's orbit had destabilized, and now it was careening towards a nearby black hole. Captain, Lieutenant Omar Reyes spoke up, his voice unusually tense. Something's not right about this. Jenna's eyes shifted to the sensor's display. A glimmer of worry passed through her. The data didn't add up. It was as though the laws of physics themselves had suddenly decided to take the day off. The moon's orbital mechanics were all wrong. The gravitational anomalies that should have torn it apart had yet to manifest. What was going on here? This can't be right, Jenna muttered under her breath. Are you sure we should be this close? Reyes asked, his tone mixed with both curiosity and concern. We don't have a choice, Jenna replied, standing tall. If we don't investigate it now, it might pull the Peregrine in with it. The stakes had just escalated. The ship had been on a routine survey mission through this uncharted region when they first noticed the disturbance. A strange, pulsating signal emanating from the moon, undetectable by most conventional sensors. Only the advanced tech of the Peregrine could isolate it. But even then, the signal was elusive, shifting between frequencies in a way that defied explanation. And then the moon itself, a perfectly spherical object, became the source of even more confusion. Humanity's reputation as the species that dared to think where others didn't was becoming evident now. The Peregrine was the only ship in range capable of answering the question, why was a moon caught in the gravitational web of a black hole without suffering the normal consequences? Captain, we have incoming, Reyes interrupted, breaking Jenna's train of thought. The comm system blared to life, the voice of the first officer echoing from across the bridge. We've detected a fleet of ships approaching the coordinates. They're not human. Jenna's lips pressed into a thin line. Her fingers danced across the holographic console. Show me. The display expanded to reveal a trio of sleek, metallic ships, entirely unfamiliar to the Peregrine. Their design was sharp, almost insectoid, their hulls gleaming like polished chrome, and their weapons glinting in the starlight. The readings identified them as being of a species known as the Draxian, a race notorious for their lack of creativity but exceptional at brute force tactics. Draxian? Jenna asked, her brow furrowing. Yes, Captain, Reyes responded. We've encountered them before, but never this far out. It's unusual for them to venture beyond their border systems. Are they coming for the moon? Jenna asked. Looks like it, Reyes answered. Interesting, Jenna muttered. Well, let's see how long they think they can intimidate us. Before she could order a tactical response, the Draxian ships locked on with their weapons, a menacing hum filling the air as they powered up their energy weapons. Let's hope we can outsmart them. Reyes, prepare for evasive maneuvers. And keep an eye on that moon. I don't like how it's moving. The longer we stay here, the riskier it gets. The Draxians were slow to respond, clearly unsure of how to handle the situation. They had not expected to find a human ship in their path, nor one that was so bold in its actions. Jenna Sloan, however, had no intention of letting her crew be pushed around. Her reputation as one of the sharpest strategists in the fleet was not built on brute force, but rather on her uncanny ability to turn the tables in situations that others considered lost causes. Captain, Reyes spoke up again, we're being hailed by the Draxian lead ship. On screen, Jenna ordered, adjusting her posture as the bridge lights dimmed slightly, giving the impression of a more intimate confrontation. The view screen flickered to life, and a face appeared, large, insectoid, and imposing. The Draxian commander's compound eyes glinted in the light, his voice a low rasp. "Human vessel," the commander began. "You are in violation of Draxian space. Stand down and prepare to be boarded." Jenna didn't flinch. "Commander," she said coolly. "I'm afraid your assessment is wrong. This is not Draxian space. It's a free system, and that moon over there? It's our priority now. But, if you're interested, I'll happily show you what a mistake it is to stand in the way of a human captain." The Draxian blinked, clearly taken aback by the boldness of her reply. "You threaten us, human? You are outmatched. Surrender or face destruction." Jenna's lips curled into a smile. "I'll make you a deal, Commander. You turn around, and I'll let you leave with whatever dignity you have left. Otherwise, we can see how your fleet handles the next surprise coming your way." The Draxian hesitated, his mandibles clicking together in thought. Jenna knew she was buying time, but she also knew that without some creative thinking, the odds were stacked against them. The Peregrine was no match for the firepower of the Draxian fleet, especially with the black hole looming in the distance. "Get me a status report on that moon," Jenna ordered quickly. "I want to know everything about it, every little detail. And Reyes, prep the weapons. We may not be able to talk our way out of this." The tension on the bridge was palpable as the crew moved to their stations, their eyes shifting between the Draxian fleet and the approaching moon. Jenna could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. She'd faced impossible odds before, but this was something entirely new. But if there was one thing she knew, it was that humans had a knack for solving problems in ways no one saw coming. And right now, she had the distinct feeling that the solution would require thinking far beyond the obvious. The crew of the Peregrine steeled themselves for whatever came next. It was time to show the galaxy what humanity was truly capable of. The ship shuddered, and an alarming red light flashed on the console. The Peregrine had just crossed into the danger zone. The moon was beginning to destabilize in ways no one had anticipated, and the Draxians were closing in, intent on forcing them out of the way. Jenna clenched her fists, her mind racing as the black hole's pull grew stronger. The Draxians were watching, waiting for her next move. But she wasn't about to make it easy for them. If there was one thing she understood better than anyone, it was this: where others saw problems, humans saw opportunities. And she was going to need every bit of that ingenuity if she was going to get her crew out of this alive. The question was no longer just about survival. It was about whether or not she could think her way out of the chaos before it was too late. And with that thought, Jenna Sloane's plan began to take shape. The Peregrine was spiraling. The moon, now dislodged from its erratic orbit around the gas giant, had begun to move with alarming velocity. The gravitational anomalies that had once been a mere curiosity were now a direct threat. The black hole, once a distant but tangible danger, was now much closer than anyone had expected. And the Draxian fleet, too, was closing in. "Captain," Lieutenant Reyes's voice was tense, but steady. "The moon is accelerating. Its trajectory is unstable. We have less than 20 minutes before it enters the event horizon." Jenna's mind raced. The numbers didn't lie. At this rate, they would be dragged into the black hole along with it, unless she did something, and fast. "I know," Jenna replied, her voice low but firm. She tapped her fingers against the control panel. The Draxian ships were still in pursuit, but their slow-moving tactics were not designed for this kind of situation. "Reyes, can you get us close enough to the moon to do a proper scan of its surface?" "Yes, Captain," Reyes replied. "But we'll need to move quickly. The Draxians won't give us much time." "Then we move quickly," Jenna said, her mind already turning through calculations. "Tell the crew to prepare for evasive maneuvers. I'll figure out a way to deal with the Draxians once we have what we need." The stakes were high, higher than they had ever been. And now Jenna was faced with a decision that could either solve the problem or doom them all. With the black hole's pull growing stronger by the second, she had no choice but to move forward. But the real challenge lay in what would come next. As the Peregrine edged closer to the moon, Jenna couldn't help but feel the growing tension in the pit of her stomach. Her crew had trained for situations like this, but nothing quite like this. Everything was unstable, everything was uncertain. The Draxian fleet was closing the distance. They'd fired a warning shot across the ship's bow, a reminder of the threat they posed. Jenna didn't flinch. "Captain, they're locking weapons," Reyes warned. "They'll fire in 3 seconds." "I know," she said calmly. "We need to keep moving. On my mark, execute evasive patterns 8 and 9. As the ship rumbled, her crew worked swiftly, guided by the clear direction of their captain. Reyes issued the order to shift course, and the ship banked sharply, sending the crew reeling for a moment as they adjusted to the new trajectory. Jenna knew that the evasive maneuvers would buy them some time, but not much. The Peregrine was no match for the firepower of the Draxian fleet. She would need something far more unconventional to break free of their grasp. "Do you have any updates from the scan?" Jenna asked, her voice sharp. "Working on it," Reyes replied. "The moon is covered in dense metallic layers, too thick to get a full picture of its interior. But there's one thing that's odd." "What's that?" Jenna asked, trying to keep her impatience in check. "Some areas of the moon's surface are emitting power readings," Reyes said, his voice filled with confusion. "They're inconsistent, erratic. But definitely not natural." Jenna's eyes narrowed. "Is it a device of some kind?" "That's the conclusion we're leaning toward," Reyes said, his hands flying over the controls. "I think it's some sort of ancient relic, or a weapon, buried beneath the surface." "Anything that could help us turn the tide?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know yet, Captain. But I'll keep trying." Jenna's mind reeled. A weapon. An artifact buried beneath the moon's surface, sending out mysterious power signals? This was something far more complex than they had anticipated, but it was also a glimmer of hope. If they could figure out what the Draxians were after, and if they could control it, perhaps they could use it to turn the tables. But that meant getting close enough to the moon. And with the Draxians on their tail, that wasn't going to be easy. The ship shuddered again as another shot from the Draxian fleet clipped the Peregrine's outer hull. Sparks flew, and an alarm blared across the bridge. "Shields holding at 78%, Reyes reported. "But we can't take many more hits like that." "Keep us moving," Jenna ordered, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts. She needed a plan. A real plan. Her eyes flicked to the moon as the Peregrine slid closer, its surface growing larger with every passing second. She could see its craggy surface now, the deep fissures, the glowing streaks of energy that ran like veins beneath the rocky exterior. There was no time to waste. She needed to figure out what was buried beneath that surface, and quickly. A thought struck her. "Reyes," she said, her voice low and steady. "Can you override the Draxian signal jamming systems? If I can get close enough, I can hack into their communications." Reyes looked at her in surprise. "That's a long shot, Captain. But if we can get through their comms, we might be able to disrupt their coordination. It'll buy us some time." "That's all we need," Jenna said, her mind already working through the details. "We disrupt their communications long enough for us to get close to the moon. Once we do that, I'll deploy a probe. I want to know what's down there." Reyes nodded. "Understood. I'll prepare the probe. But, if the Draxians figure out what we're doing, we'll have to fight our way out." Jenna's lips tightened, but she didn't answer. The plan was risky. In fact, it was a desperate gamble. But right now, it was the only card she had left to play. "Do it, Reyes. Get us into position." As Reyes worked, Jenna's mind swirled with possibilities. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. If they could uncover whatever ancient relic or weapon lay beneath the moon's surface, it could change the course of their conflict with the Draxians, and perhaps even the course of their future in the galaxy. But first, they had to survive long enough to get close. Another blast hit the ship, this one shaking the entire bridge. The lights flickered, and an explosion echoed through the hull. Jenna felt the pressure mounting, both from the black hole pulling them in and the Draxians bearing down on them. Her crew was working at maximum capacity, every person doing their part to keep the Peregrine intact, and she couldn't afford to lose them now. "Captain!" Reyes shouted. "I'm locking onto their comms. Prepare to transmit in 3, 2, 1. The console flashed green, signaling that they had hacked into the Draxian communication grid. Jenna didn't waste a second. "Now," she said, her voice ringing with authority. "Send them a message. Let's see if we can't make them second-guess their strategy." Reyes grinned, tapping in the last command. The message went out to the Draxian fleet. Jenna didn't know if it would work, but she knew one thing: the next few minutes were critical. If this plan succeeded, they might just make it out alive. If not, well, she wasn't ready to accept failure. The countdown had begun. The Peregrine was closing in on the moon. The Draxian fleet was closing in on them. And the black hole loomed ever closer. It was time to see if human ingenuity would save the day. "Let's move," Jenna whispered under her breath, bracing for the next phase of the mission. The Peregrine was so close now to the moon that the ship's viewports filled with the jagged, glowing surface. It was almost mesmerizing, swirling energy streaks, like ancient veins of forgotten power, pulsing across the rough terrain. Jenna had never seen anything like it. But there was no time for awe. "Shields holding steady at 56%, Captain," Reyes called out, his voice strained but focused as he worked the console. "The Draxians are closing in fast. If we don't break off soon, they'll be able to target our engines." Jenna nodded sharply. They had only moments before the black hole's pull would become too much for even the Peregrine to fight. "How long until we can drop a probe down to the surface?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the moon as if it could offer her an answer. 3 minutes, Reyes replied, not looking up from his console. "But Captain, we need to break off and get away from the Draxians now. They're onto us. If they fire those plasma bursts, we won't last another minute." She didn't even glance at the tactical readout. "Keep us steady, Reyes. I'm not leaving until we get what we need." The ship shuddered once more as another blast from the Draxians rocked the Peregrine, the hull groaning under the assault. Alarms blared, red lights flashing across the bridge, but Jenna remained unmoved. She could feel the pressure mounting, her crew was feeling it too. The black hole loomed just beyond the ship's reach, its pull becoming more intense with every passing second. And the Draxians, those predictable, infuriatingly single-minded brutes, weren't about to give up. "We're running out of time," Reyes said, his voice edged with panic. "If we don't." "We stay the course," Jenna interrupted, her voice calm but commanding. "I'll figure out a way to buy us the time we need." The Draxians had already opened fire again, their plasma bursts arcing through space toward the Peregrine. Jenna's mind was working furiously, searching for a way to stop them. But she couldn't afford to waste time with distractions. Not now. Not when they were so close. "Prepare for evasive pattern Omega-6, Jenna ordered. "We're going to keep them off balance." Reyes punched the command into the console, and the ship lurched as it shifted course. The Draxian fleet, however, had anticipated this maneuver, and their ships followed with precision, each one launching its next barrage of fire. The Peregrine was no match for their firepower, and Jenna knew it. But she was counting on the one thing the Draxians never expected from humanity: unpredictability. "Captain," Reyes said, his voice tight with urgency, "we're almost there. One more hit and we'll lose our engines." "Not going to happen," Jenna muttered under her breath, her hands flying over the controls as she set the course. Just a little longer. There. The moment she had been waiting for. The probe deployment sequence was now active. "Launch the probe, Reyes. Now." The probe shot out from the Peregrine, streaking toward the moon. The second it hit the atmosphere, it burrowed deep into the surface, sending back vital data through the ship's comms system. Jenna's eyes flicked to the readout, her breath catching in her throat as the first wave of scans came back. "We've got something," Reyes said, his voice filled with awe and excitement. "There's definitely a structure beneath the surface. Ancient. Massive. It looks like a facility, Captain. A weapon, maybe." Jenna's heart raced. This was it. This was the break they needed. If they could get inside the structure, if they could activate whatever ancient technology lay hidden beneath the moon's surface, they might just stand a chance against the Draxians. But the Draxians weren't giving up. The moment they saw the probe deploy, they shifted into high gear, launching a barrage of missiles aimed directly at the Peregrine. "Brace for impact," Reyes shouted as the bridge crew scrambled to secure their stations. The ship was rocked by the force of the blast, but the shields held, barely. Jenna could feel the strain on the ship's structure. If they didn't make a move, they were dead. But she wasn't about to die here. "Take us in close," Jenna barked, her voice commanding. "We need to get to that structure. Reyes, plot us a course to that facility. Now." The Peregrine twisted and turned as it dodged incoming fire from the Draxian fleet, closing the gap between them and the moon's surface. Jenna's mind was already running through the possibilities. She had no idea what kind of weapon or technology lay buried beneath the moon, but she had no choice but to trust that it would be their salvation. The ship made a sharp turn, the massive structure now within range on their scanner. The Peregrine shuddered violently as another hit rattled the hull, but Jenna held steady, her eyes locked on the glowing outline of the facility. "We're almost there," Reyes said, his voice filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. "But the Draxians are closing in. They'll have us locked in their sights in 2 minutes." "Then we need to make it count," Jenna replied. She could feel the tension building, the entire bridge taut with the strain of the situation. "Do you have a way to disable their targeting systems?" Reyes looked at her, his face pale. "It's risky. But, maybe." "Do it," she ordered. "If we're going to survive this, we have to outsmart them. Now. Or we die trying." Without another word, Reyes tapped into the ship's systems, sending a series of rapid pulses through the Draxian fleet's communication channels. The Draxians were still struggling to break through the jamming signal from the Peregrine, but now they were facing an entirely new challenge. The targeting systems began to falter, glitching and sputtering as they lost synchronization. "Captain!" Reyes called out, his voice urgent. "The Draxians are losing their lock. We're in the clear for now." "Good work," Jenna said, her voice tight with concentration. "Now keep us steady. We're going to land." The Peregrine lurched again as it hurtled towards the moon's surface, but Jenna's mind was focused solely on the structure ahead. The ship scraped against the surface as it descended, its landing gear striking the jagged, uneven terrain. "We've made it!" Reyes shouted, relief flooding his voice. But they were far from safe. The Draxian fleet was regrouping, their ships closing in once again. And the Peregrine was now stuck on the surface of the moon, no longer able to maneuver. "Get me that facility," Jenna ordered, turning to her crew. "We need to find a way inside, now." As the doors to the moon's underground structure opened on their scanners, revealing a complex labyrinth of dark hallways and control rooms, Jenna felt a surge of hope. The moment they had been waiting for had arrived. But with the Draxian fleet now just moments away, she knew they didn't have long before they were faced with the biggest challenge of all. And this time, it wasn't just about fighting for survival. It was about securing a victory, and turning the tide of the war. "Reyes," Jenna said, turning to her lieutenant, "prepare the team. We're going in." With one final glance at the Draxian fleet closing in, Jenna took a deep breath, steeling herself for what was to come. This was the moment. They were about to face the unknown, and she had no intention of backing down. The facility beneath the moon's surface was dark, cold, and strangely quiet. The walls were ancient, etched with alien symbols, worn by centuries of neglect. Jenna could feel the weight of history pressing in on her, the echoes of civilizations long gone. It was a place built for something much larger than what humanity had ever encountered. But right now, the only thing that mattered was finding the weapon or technology that could help them survive. And the Draxians were coming. Every second counted. "Captain," Reyes said, his voice reverberating through the comms. "The Draxians are only a few minutes out. We've got to move quickly." Jenna nodded as she looked around the dimly lit corridor. The walls were lined with unfamiliar panels, some cracked, others still humming faintly with what appeared to be dormant energy. The air was thick, almost stale, as though the facility had not been touched in millennia. And yet, there was a certain hum, an undercurrent of power just beneath the surface. "We're not leaving without something," Jenna said firmly. "Let's move. Reyes, stay on the comms. I need updates every 30 seconds. Reyes acknowledged her, and the team moved deeper into the structure. Every step echoed in the hollow, abandoned halls. As they pushed forward, the air grew colder, and Jenna felt a strange sensation at the back of her neck, an electric charge that hummed in her bones. This place wasn't just a relic. It was alive in some way. The deeper they went, the more the facility seemed to pulse with energy. And as they neared the heart of it, the walls began to glow with an eerie, soft blue light. "There," Lieutenant Connors said, pointing to a large door at the far end of the hall. It was sealed tight, its surface covered in layers of dust and grime. But the energy readings were unmistakable. Behind that door was what they had come for. The team gathered at the entrance. Jenna stepped forward, her pulse quickening. She could hear the distant hum of Draxian ships in the background, their engines vibrating through the surface of the moon. The pressure was mounting. But the door in front of them was the key to everything. She could feel it. "Connors, get that door open," she ordered. Connors stepped forward, drawing a tool from his belt. He worked swiftly, slicing through the aged control panel with practiced efficiency. Sparks flew from the wiring, but the door remained firmly shut. "Come on," Jenna muttered under her breath. She felt the pull of the black hole growing stronger with each passing minute. She wasn't sure if it was the gravitational force or the growing weight of the moment, but every second felt like an eternity. Connors looked up, his face grim. "I can't bypass the security system from here, Captain. The door's linked to a central processor. I'll need to access the main control room to override it." "Where's the control room?" Jenna asked, not missing a beat. Connors pointed to a corridor to the left. "Straight down that way. Maybe 200 meters. Reyes, get the team ready to move," Jenna ordered. "We'll head for the control room. Move fast." The group sprinted through the twisting halls, the silence broken only by the pounding of their feet on the cold floor. The walls seemed to close in on them, and Jenna could feel the oppressive weight of the moment. If they didn't get through this door and find the weapon or technology that lay within, they would be caught in the black hole's event horizon. And if the Draxians reached them first, they would have no chance. As they neared the control room, Jenna's heart pounded in her chest. The door ahead of them was massive, more fortified than anything she had ever seen. Covered in strange, intricate symbols, the panel that controlled it looked far more advanced than anything humanity had ever encountered. It was clear that the Draxians were after whatever lay inside this facility for a reason. "We're going to need to think fast," Reyes said, his voice steady, but with a trace of urgency. "I'm not leaving here empty-handed," Jenna said, her words like steel. "Connors, you know what to do." Connors nodded. He stepped forward, analyzing the panel. "There's a complex security protocol in place. If I try to bypass it directly, we'll trigger a lockout. We'll be locked out for hours." "Then don't bypass it," Jenna said, a sudden inspiration sparking in her mind. "We're going to do this the old-fashioned way." Connors raised an eyebrow. "Captain? I want you to override the protocol by triggering a secondary system," Jenna said, already working through the plan in her head. "The power fluctuations will cause the system to reset. That'll buy us a few seconds. But that could trigger a shutdown," Connors warned. Jenna didn't hesitate. We don't have a choice. Do it. Connors nodded and worked quickly. He manipulated the wires, triggering a surge in the system's power supply. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the massive doors shuttered. Sparks flew from the control panel, but the door's locking mechanism gave way. The doors began to slide open, slowly at first, but then faster as the system reset. Jenna felt the weight in her chest lift for a brief moment. But it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Get ready, Jenna said, her voice barely above a whisper. We're going in. The doors opened fully, revealing a vast chamber inside. The room was filled with strange, alien machinery, massive machines that hummed with an unsettling energy. The air smelled of ozone, and the floor was covered in thick dust. But at the center of the room stood what they had been searching for, a massive, pulsating energy core. It was glowing with a blinding blue light, its power surging through the facility like a heartbeat. That's it, Reyes said, his voice filled with awe. Jenna's eyes narrowed. The core was more than just a power source, it was the key. She could feel its energy, its potential. If she could activate it, if she could harness whatever power lay within, they could turn the tide. But there was one problem. We don't have much time, Connors said, his eyes flicking to the readout on his wrist. The Draxians are nearly here. Jenna nodded. She could feel the Draxians closing in, their ships converging on the surface. They didn't have long before the Peregrine would be lost, or worse, before the Draxians would take the weapon for themselves. Reyes, can you access the control panel? Jenna asked, her mind already racing. I'll try, Reyes replied, stepping toward the console that controlled the core. As Reyes worked, Jenna's mind was already working through the next steps. The Draxians wouldn't stop. They would keep coming, no matter what they activated here. But if she could trigger this weapon, it could change everything. Captain, Reyes called out, his voice sharp with urgency. I can't activate it remotely. I'll need to plug into the core directly. Jenna nodded, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins. She was about to take one of the biggest risks of her life, but there was no choice. If they didn't do this, they were all dead. Do it, she said, her voice resolute. I'll cover you. Reyes nodded and moved toward the core, the glow from the energy pulsating across his face. As he approached the heart of the facility, the air around him seemed to thrum with raw power. Get ready, Reyes said. This is going to get interesting. Suddenly, the chamber shook violently as a blast of energy shot out from the core, slamming into the walls. Sparks flew as the machinery whined and groaned. It was working, too well, in fact. Reyes. Jenna shouted over the noise. What did you do? I think I just supercharged the core, Reyes yelled back, his voice filled with excitement and fear. But it's unstable. We need to move. The room was filling with energy, the air thickening with the intensity of it. Reyes raced to a terminal on the far side of the room, his fingers flying over the controls as he tried to stabilize the system. But it was too late. The core was reacting on its own, surging with raw power. The doors to the chamber slammed shut, trapping them inside. Captain! Reyes shouted. We need to go, now. Jenna didn't need to be told twice. She grabbed Reyes's arm and pulled him toward the exit, the power of the core threatening to rip the chamber apart. But as they sprinted toward the doors, Jenna felt something shift in the air. The Peregrine had its power back, only this time, it wasn't just the ship. It was something far more powerful. They didn't stop running. The doors opened, and as the Peregrine's engines roared to life outside, they were greeted by the sound of explosions. The Draxians' ships had arrived. But this time, Jenna wasn't running. She had what she needed. We're not finished yet, Jenna said, her voice steady as she helped Reyes back onto the ship. And as the Peregrine shot into the sky, the power of the ancient core now under their control, Jenna knew one thing for certain. The tide was turning. They had won.